This is the internet court of truth and lies. Its purpose is if somebody believes that something is the truth in the media or somebody believes that there's something that's a lie in the media, they, as a plaintiff, can make a case in front of 8 jurors as to why they believe it's the truth or a lie. There are 8 verdict questions, which are never perfect for the truth or the lie that's being defended, but they are good for any truth or any lie. And their purpose is really to keep the conversation on topic as to whether or not something that's been claimed to be a truth or a lie is in fact a truth or a lie. The result is that the plaintiff almost invariably finds that there's something he hadn't thought about, and the jurors also see how other people think about the same question about whether or not something's a truth or a lie. So everybody basically finds this an interesting task. There is one of the reasons it's interesting is there's no need in the truth court to reach a consensus among everybody as to whether or not something's a truth or a lie. This is not a sovereign court, but everybody gets to walk away from it with their own opinion about whether or not something was a truth or a lie. That's the way this thing works. Today, I've got a trial that has to do with the fact that I bought a Tesla Model Y with full self-driving something like mid-May, about 2.5 months ago. I found that the full self-driving was unbelievably good. One instance is I drove 700 miles down interstates and country roads and everything you could possibly imagine without touching the steering wheel or the brakes on the car. It drove the whole way, including stopping for at superchargers. It would park right at the supercharger. All I had to do was get out of the car, plug the supercharger in, and 16 or 20 minutes later, unplug the car and drive on. It would pull out of the parking spot and get back on the interstate or whatever road it was going on. So it would go from my driveway to a driveway in Georgia, back, and park. I've been doing work in autonomous vehicles since the early 1980s. And in the first few years of developing these things, we discovered that we could use a neural network to steer the car or steer the truck or steer the tank. The neural network can do smooth actions like a human can do them in steering. It doesn't just jump around. And they worked beautifully. The problem we had with the early systems was not the motion control that looked like human motion control because we were using neural networks, but the expense in getting the neural networks to do things like computer vision, or seeing what was actually there and knowing whether the car was headed on the road or headed toward a tree. We actually had code at one time where the vision code couldn't tell whether or not something was a tree or the road. We had many times where the vehicle would start heading for a tree and the person that was the supervisory driver had to take over right before it hit the tree. But that's just a case of the perception system, but the motion control systems were all very doable. Today we've got Teslas out with full self-driving, which is unbelievably good, using the same type of coding that we used in the early 80s on the first autonomous vehicles. So I really understand this stuff well. One of the things that I'm concerned about is that the other people don't understand it very well. I was actually, for the first month or so, month and a half of driving or letting this thing drive me, in mortal fear. So I'd see we were headed toward a telephone pole and I was wondering whether we were going to hit it or not. or going through a construction zone and wondering whether or not we're going to hit the guy holding the slow sign, or even being in situations where people were running on the side of the road or whatever and worrying that the vehicles are going to hit them. I had one situation which had a mother duck and some baby ducks trying to cross the road, and the friggin' Tesla slowed down, stopped, and let the mother duck take the little babies across the road, and then it took off again. That was amazing. So it's really kind of there. The real problem is I know how these things work and why they work as well as they do. They work as well as they do because they are emulating how a human being thinks, perceives, acts, and understands things. That's what they do. They compute like humans compute, human brains compute. We now have the hardware that's needed to actually be able to demonstrate systems that are remarkably human. And the Tesla FSD is just such a system. When Elon Musk decided to switch to 100% neural net for his self-driving from a previous incarnation where you code each little rule, where a person codes each little rule independently, but you can't code enough rules. No human can think of every situation you're going to come up against. He started using 100% neural network architecture, and that's when full self-driving started working. It works remarkably like a human, but the two biggest complaints is one of them is it doesn't drive like you drive. It's driving you, it's human, and every human drives a car differently, except this is one where you think it's a machine and it should be driving the way you want to drive, but it wants to drive the way it wants to drive, which after you've observed it driving for a while, you realize it's safer than you are when you drive. It's basically doing things that are safer. The other thing about the self-driving is that it will scare you what it's doing. For example, that case of the going toward a telephone pole, you get over that after a couple of 3 weeks riding. But during those 3 weeks riding, you do get scared a lot because you wonder whether or not it's going to handle the situation you're staring at, and you wonder whether or not if it doesn't handle it, you're going to be able to correct the situation before there's a crash or something like this. It turns out after a while, for me it took at least a month, and this is, I know how these things work, and I knew that, for example, it shouldn't hit that telephone pole, but I had been in vehicles where it would have. Okay, so I had seen that happen. These were vehicles that were 40 years ago. The problem is that I see pretty clearly is that we really do need for you to operate or supervise a self-driving vehicle, or even, to my mind, ride in a robo-taxi, which is a fully automated vehicle. You should have to have a license. You should pass some fundamental tests to make sure that you understand exactly what these automated vehicles can and cannot do and how you can use them. So the thought is that on a driver's license, I have a motorcycle license as well as a regular driver's license. My driver's license has an M on it that says that I'm able to drive a motorcycle. And I think that the driver's licenses should have an A on them that say that you're able to supervise an automated vehicle in whatever way you would need to supervise it, that you understand how these automated vehicles actually work. So that's the argument that I'm making here. I'm going to give you a little bit more on the argument. In the paper I wrote, I had Grok come up with questions to ask for a driver's license. And I don't necessarily agree these are the right questions. In fact, I don't think they are the right questions that Grok came up with. We'll go over one or two of them in a second. One of the things that everybody who has a driver's license knows that you take a written test and a driving test. And I think that automated vehicles need to be like that. You should have to bring your automated vehicle to where you can get the driver's license or the supervisor's license for the vehicle. They should sit in the car with you and ask you to do certain things to prove you know how to do them on this automated vehicle. I also think that there should be a short written test, and the motorcycle test is like this. There's a short written test for the motorcycle class to be added to your driver's license. There should be some questions that demonstrate some basic knowledge about these automated vehicles, what to expect, and how you can interact with them. To give you an example, this is the online driver's license manual for the state of Pennsylvania. Here's the signals and signs, pavement markings. These are things that you'll be tested on. What does this mean? What does that mean? The driving record information, this informs you that PennDOT's maintains a driving record for every licensed driver. So it's telling you something about the legal situation around driving these cars and so forth and so on. It tells you about other things, the kinds of permits you can get. You can get a learner's permit, for example, and so forth and so on. You're tested on your knowledge of this driver's manual. Similarly, there should be some tests on the autonomous vehicle. The problem that we have, and I asked Grok, do all autonomous vehicles have a way for either the supervisor to take manual control or to stop safely if the rider indicates an emergency? Its answer is no. Not all autonomous vehicles have a traditional onboard supervisor who can take full manual control. It says that some systems, there's an external supervisor. It's a real person on the radio link or something. But all of these autonomous vehicles, it's kind of too early, and there's no real standards that govern all the different ways in which these autonomous vehicles work. A solution to that would be that you're tested on the vehicle you intend to use, where the system can know what are the appropriate test questions for that vehicle. In the case of Teslas, there are a number of features in the Tesla and how it operates in full self-driving that make meaningless some of the requirements that Grok originally put on this thing. So I'll give you one example. What he says here is, what is the highest level of autonomy this vehicle is certified for according to the SAE international standards? Those standards were written 20 years ago and are really no good. They really don't discriminate the different levels of autonomy that have actually evolved. It's kind of a mess. Name 3 specific situations in which self-driving system is likely to disengage or perform poorly, requiring you to take immediate manual control: heavy rain, snow that obscures sensors, construction zones with temporary lane markings, unmapped roads. It turns out the heavy rain and snow, the Tesla, for example, will slow down and it will pull off the road. It will say, I can't see, I'm pulling off the road. Okay. You can take over if you think you can see, but by then you probably can't see a thing either. The construction zones with temporary lane markings, it handles them like a champ. It's stunning how well it handles them. I've been in construction zones where they were just setting up the equipment and all the workers were out in the middle of the road rumbling around and didn't run anybody over, and it maneuvered its way through the construction zone. This happens numbers of times. Unmapped roads, this is a real problem. If the roads are mapped roads, these autonomous vehicles work really well because they know where they should be with respect to their GPS. They can know what to expect next down the road and so forth and so on. But if the roads are completely unmapped, like a lot of parking lots are completely unmapped, these vehicles have a hard time navigating them because they don't have knowledge of the whole environment that they're around, and so forth and so on. I did have one piece of news from the last time I discussed this, which is I have a gravel and concrete driveway, but it's gravel, and you can't drive on the driveway because the driveway is like at this angle. So if you try to drive on the driveway, your tires break. You have to drive on the part that does not look like you should be driving on it, which is the gravel. And my Tesla drove once and tried to get on the concrete, and I took over and took it on the gravel. The second time it tried a little less to get on the concrete, and I still pulled it over to get on the gravel. It's parked automatically, driving on this 50 yards worth of gravel without ever even trying the concrete. In other words, it learned what the appropriate way into that parking area was just by me doing it a few times. So unmapped roads are real problems. And people should understand that. They should understand that the autonomous vehicles are not going to work very well in a situation where they can't figure out what the roads are. The areas with many pedestrians, cyclists, with the Tesla, I've driven through situation after situation where there are all kinds of people walking around and just have had no problems at all. And I mentioned the one with the mother duck and the little chicklings. It's just amazing. One of the problems I have here is who's legally responsible for the vehicle's action while self-driving mode is engaged in your jurisdiction? How does this change if you're required to remain attentive? They should really normalize this kind of thing. If every jurisdiction has different rules, this gets into crazy stuff. Before starting a trip, you must include items such as ensuring the cameras, LiDAR, radar are clean and unobstructed. You can't see these cameras. You have no way to know whether they're unobstructed. So for example, in the Tesla facing forward, there are actually 3 cameras and they're completely redundant. But when you look at the views you get one view because you only really want to see ahead. If you look at the views of what's ahead of the car, you only want to see one of these things. And so you can't really know what the system can see. And the way that Tesla handles it is it will tell you while it's driving whether or not it's encountering some problem seeing. And it will say things like, I'm having problems seeing, I'm going to go slower now. And then if necessary, it'll stop the car and it'll tell you which camera it's not seeing through, and you can go out and try to clean it. Yeah. So this idea that you have to inspect these beforehand, I don't even know how you think about that. Okay. But you just have to assume that they're okay, and that when you start the car, inspects them beforehand and tells you what you can do and you can't do. I don't understand why they would say you have to perform that. One of the big problems here is it says that if you're a supervisor in a self-driving car, it says that you must keep your hands on the steering wheel at all times. If you kept your hands on the steering wheel of the Tesla, you wouldn't be able to do it. You'd be pulling it out of self-driving. Just moving the steering wheel a little bit stops the self-driving. So the 2 things that stop the self-driving are moving the steering wheel a little bit or hitting the brakes a little bit. It will stop the self-driving, but those are intentional actions on your part that it takes to mean stop self-driving. the supervisor's taking over. So this idea that you have to have your hands on the steering wheel the whole time might be true in some autonomous vehicles, but in the Tesla, it is certainly not true. And I think that Tesla actually solved the problem in kind of the right way. So this is an interesting situation. I think that these questions are the wrong questions, but figuring out what the right questions are is a really interesting idea. The other thing is that they should be specific to specific types of autonomous vehicles. And here's some real world examples like Waymo. Waymo does not have drivers in the cars, but the rider does have a pullover button that he can hit to cause his autonomous vehicle to pull over to the side, maybe because it's scared him or whatever. It has a pullover. The Teslas do not. The Teslas don't have a pullover button. They assume there's a supervisor there that's going to be able to pull over if he has to. The supervisor will take a hold of the steering wheel. It'll immediately come out of self-driving, and the supervisor will take it over to the side. One of the special situations is if the supervisor falls over like he's dead, okay, the Tesla will recognize that, will recognize the supervisor is no longer paying attention, and will pull over and stop. And put your blinkers on. You have the option of having the Tesla call 911 type thing. So what I think is these tests have to be specific to the vehicles, but they do need to be available so people can understand what these things do. That's my case. I'm arguing is that there should be a driver's license class for autonomous vehicle supervision. And is it the truth? I 100% think that there should be some written and probably demonstrate that you can control the full self-driving if you ever intend to use it. Is it the whole truth? I said yes. I think there's so many reasons to have at least a few questions in a real driving test with a guy who knows how to control the autonomous vehicle to prove that you know what you're doing when you're controlling it. You're supervising it, or starting it up, or using it. Is it nothing but the truth? I said yes. I said there's no deceit here. The truth is absolutely intended. The motivation is to be informative. I think that this is a natural that the driver's license should have a driver's license class that just says that you can do this stuff, that you've proven that you have the knowledge about exactly what this vehicle is that you're driving can and cannot be expected to do. And ideally, why? So I gave you one case of why. If the road is not mapped, it's going to be a problem. It's much more likely to have a problem. What label would improve the social acceptability of the truth or lie? Oh, another one is that you have to understand these are humanoid robots and they do not drive like you. And you can't get them to drive like you because you will do some things that it will refuse to do. So, for example, all the Teslas obey the law and will stop, come to a full stop at a stop sign. I think people will get mad at that because it stops. And they're not used to stopping at stop signs. And they will think this is bad. But they need to know up front that it's going to obey the law. And that's okay. That's the safe thing to do. And it might cost you a few seconds to get from one location to another because it stops at the stop signs. But it's a good thing to give the vehicle a chance to make sure that it's going out into the crossing to the traffic after the stop sign. What label would improve the social acceptability? I think I said no label is needed. So what I'm going to do is go through the jurors and see whether I convince them that we have to have driver's licenses or not. Juror one.
Okay. What I think is that the Tesla, when you buy the vehicle, they ought to have a driver's class that's included with it and then give you a certificate if you pass it. Because what if, I don't think we should give the driver's license bureau some more money to make off of this. And what happens if you fail it and you bought this 50,000 vehicle?
So the right answer is that full self-driving is not automatic. A robotaxi is different. But this idea of having the manufacturer certify, that's possible. Tesla, as far as I can tell, does not have a person at this point of sale that can do much, that knows very much.
Okay, one real quick question is, you said it saw ducks walking. It does only see moving things. It won't stop if it sees a deer in the road.
Oh, no, it stops with a deer in the road. In fact, that mother duck had stopped.
Oh.
She'd come out into the road a foot or two, and she had stopped because the car was coming, and then the car saw her and must have seen little ducklings and figured.
So even a skunk, it's going to stop a turtle?
So I don't know. I haven't seen a turtle, but the right answer is that it's very careful, and it does even see deer standing at the side of the road, and it will slow down. And if the road is clear, it will go give the deer extra feet.
I'm definitely sold. Thank you.
So juror 2?
Our juror 2 was unfinalized.
Okay. Is juror 3?
That's me. Okay. So I ran all the questions through Gemini, and I was pretty fascinated by it. And to make a long story short, I did get a 15-second summary, and here's what it says. The reality, it is not current law. States still rely on standard licenses and corporate permits. The truth, it addresses a real safety need. Human drivers naturally lose focus when monitoring automated systems. The deceit, framing a paper license as a total safety fix, can act as a corporate liability shield, shifting blame from AI software onto human operators. And the solution, rebranding the concept as an autonomous safety specialist certification or automation endorsement, bridges the gap, creating public trust without adding clumsy DMV bureaucracy.
I think that there's another scenario that says that you have to watch a certain video that's been approved by the manufacturer and the state. That the video, you have to watch a video and then you get the certification. That's possible. A video for that car, the one that you're buying.
Yeah. I've attached all of it in the email to you, but it's pretty interesting. It's got some pretty neat stuff in it that Jim and I pulled, but that was just a brief summary for all of it.
Yeah, the hardest thing to get over, and it took me over a month to get over it, was the fear levels. You'd be seeing something, and at this point, I've learned to trust it. And it's amazing. So almost every other time I ride in it, I'll see something I've never seen before in the car, and I'll wonder if it can do it. And I've learned to just trust that it will do it. And by George, it doesn't drive like me, but it does it. It gets through, and it gets through safely.
Muhammad just asked, how does it drive at night? Which is a very good question.
It drives beautifully at night. The drive back from Atlanta was 8 p.m. in the evening to 8 a.m. in the morning. It was all nighttime driving.
Wow.
Both high speed, low speed, country roads, everything. Construction, everything. And no problem at all. The rain can get dense enough, and I'm sure snow can get dense enough that you can't see a thing, and everybody's stopping on the side of the road. But the heavy rain that I've been in, it slowed down, and say half the cars stopped, but it kept going slow, and the rain cleared up so that it could get back to moving down the road. The interstate was packed with people, so it wouldn't have been going fast anyway. But I don't think anybody was ever. There were so many cars. The traffic was going along at about 30 miles per hour anyway. But the beauty of the Tesla is if you can't see, it can't see either. If you absolutely can't see a thing, it can't see a thing either. Just so you know what it can see and what it can't see. And with LiDAR, which I've used autonomous vehicles with LiDAR for years, you can't know what they can see. They can't see some things that you think they should be able to see, but because your eyes are not LiDAR, they're not distance measurements. The LiDAR needs cameras so that they will behave like humans, because that's a problem. We tried pure LiDAR autonomous vehicles, and they were a disaster because you couldn't predict what they could see, and you couldn't guess why they didn't see something. Juror 4?
Juror 4 is me, I think. Yes, I don't know. I find this whole question curious in a number of ways, because I always understood that the whole drive to full self-driving is to emancipate people so that you don't have to have a driving license. You can use, people who are not drivers can still use them. And also in the future, when the density of cars is so high, full self-driving can operate in a much higher density environment of cars and traffic than a human being ever could.
Yeah.
I think we're moving away entirely from human beings controlling. And the whole idea that, we've got to train humans, it reminds me of the Locomotion Act of 1865 that demanded every car had 2 operators and a guy walking 60 yards in front with a red flag. It took them 30 years to get rid of that.
Yeah,
I think this is just mystic kind of hanging on to our control, when really the objective is that nobody needs to control these cars at all and no licenses will be necessary.
Yeah, I think that where this is headed is another thing that comes out from the experience with this Tesla FSD is the people on the road that are driving their cars are driving remarkably well. The Tesla's driving remarkably well, but also the number of bad drivers that are on the road is a very small number. It's amazing, because you begin to realize that the other cars are acting very predictably as far as your car is concerned, because it will do aggressive things that bet on the fact that the other drivers are doing what they appear to be doing. It's interesting. So
you mean human beings are better drivers than you expect?
Yeah, one of the things that came out of this was just this understanding that, wow, this car is predicting what all these people are going to do, and it's predicting it right. And it wouldn't be able to predict it's right unless people are very consistent in how they drive. Okay.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Yeah, and it's crazy. It just comes out at you. And you realize that because people drive very well, the roads are very safe comparatively to what they could have been. Yeah. But I agree with you. We're in the middle. That's the reason I think that the test that needs to be done, the certification idea is okay. I think that it may be that the right test is just watch a video on your car and then take a test, a written test that says that you understand. And then you go out to your car and confirm that you can do the minimum number of things you have to do. Like, for example, taking control over from self-driving is to use the steering wheel or you use the brakes. And if nobody showed you how to do it, nobody ever showed me how to do it, I didn't know how much steering wheel motion was required to take over. I didn't know how much brake was required to take over. But after a while, you get used to it. And by a while, 3 or 4 times, you get used to it, and it's just not a problem at all. But you wouldn't have thought that. You would until you did it yourself. And I think that's the kind of thing that when you're tested, they should confirm that you know how to take control. And maybe they show you how to take control through the car dealership. The people that these Tesla car dealers, they don't really know anything. There's probably somebody there who does, but the people who you're dealing with, you buy the Tesla online, you never really are dealing with a salesman. You're dealing with a guy who knows how to fill out a form.
But how do you respond to the idea that the actual control of your car is out of your hands, and that the
That's
software
that
can,
fear.
can be shut down? It can reduce your battery power completely out of your control.
Yeah. So the right answer, it earns your trust. I don't know how they actually implemented everything, but it's very likely. I do know that whatever the core system is that is driving the car is extremely well protected. It's like those three separate cameras on the front. They're seeing the same thing, but it's got three of them in case something's wrong with one of them or something happens. It behaves like a system that has a lot of redundancy and a lot of checks down at the level of the full self-driving so that it doesn't make mistakes.
It must have sideways cameras too, doesn't it? No?
Yeah, it has 7 camera positions on it. So it has front, back, 2 sides, and an inside camera. Yeah. And it watches what's going on inside, because that can just be just as dangerous as what's going on outside, like the guy falls over. Yeah. So I did notice just in the last week, the previous article I wrote that said that you should be able to name your car. You can now name your car whatever name you want, and it goes by that name. Yeah. So they read my paper. Okay.
I guess they did, yeah.
And furthermore, they must have watched the video, because now they have a button called an assistant. They have different assistants you can push buttons for, and there's 4 or 5 assistants that get Grok to be. One of them is learn another language. It's just out in the last 24 hours. And you push the button and it starts teaching you, like I was finding out it would teach people languages, but now it publicizes the fact that it can do that.
My God, it's like those hypnotism tapes that you play when you're asleep.
That's right. My grandson, who was in the back of the car at the time, he saw the assistant. He said, push the button. I pushed the button and said, learn language. I said, you want me to do that? He said, yes. So I pushed the button. And then it said, what language do you want to learn? And he said, French, which he actually knows. He's Canadian and he's got Canadian citizenship. It started teaching him French, and he was speaking French to it, and it was going, bon, you're doing great. Try this, okay? And it just kept extending the thing until he finally reached the point where he was learning something in French, which was just amazing to watch that happen. All while it was self-driving. You know,
but I think that's the way to say that you don't need licenses to run these things. You're
that's exactly
completely
right.
passive.
Yeah, I think this is the reason to watch how they do the robo taxis. They have Waymo has that pull off the road thing, but that's still something a kid could pull, right?
Yeah.
So I think what you'll see is geofenced areas. So if you want to go to a local hospital, okay, it should be able to drive you there. It should be able to tell you it can drive you there without you being.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, they're already programmed in.
Yeah, it's not programmed. It just knows that it can predict itself. It can know the roads it's going to take, and it can check and know that the roads are going to be okay, and everything's mapped and everything, and it'll get you there. And it'll notify by phone the emergency ward that there's a guy in the car who's not waking up or whatever. So I think that's very possible that they'll allow that. It's just like you said, we're in the middle of something here.
Yeah.
See how it all evolves. Juror 5.
Yeah, Bob. Yeah, at first I thought it's a terrible idea, what you suggested, but now after you explained it and you described what FSD is capable of doing, yeah, I think it does make sense for drivers to understand the vehicle, to understand what it's capable of, what it can do and what it cannot do. The other thing is, I think maybe they should look at it from a different angle. Maybe the insurance company should maybe lower premium
But they're already doing that. They're monitoring the safety, and the Tesla companies that have already lowered premiums.
No, I'm saying lowering premiums for drivers who have taken the test,
Oh,
maybe to
yeah,
incentivize
yeah,
owners.
that would be a good
That's
idea.
my thing is, would it have to be everyone now? If I've got a family of 4 and we're all driving it now, does everyone need to
Well,
take it? It can't just be the
that
owner.
everybody, well, if they can drive a car,
Yeah,
everybody has to take a test, but the test doesn't have to be long. I think it just has to be there. They have to have a basic understanding that this is another human, in the sense that it will not drive like you. It
yeah,
won't. It just will not drive in a way you expect. It'll drive in the way, if there was really another human driving, you don't tell that. Some backseat drivers do, but unless you're a backseat driver, you don't tell the driver how to drive. Okay.
yeah,
You just expect that they know how to drive because they hadn't had an accident or something.
yeah,
So you have to be ready to accept the fact that this vehicle, when it's driving automatically, it's driving like another human, which means that it will not drive like you drive.
yeah. There's certain scenarios, yeah, how will you treat police vehicles or ambulances that are behind you?
All of the autonomous vehicles that I've looked at, that I've seen, have microphones on the outside. In fact, stereo microphones on the outside. They can tell where the sounds are coming from. They definitely can see the lights. I've passed in these long trips. I've passed accidents where there were fresh accidents where the policemen
Okay.
were all around and so forth and so on. And the car is very aware of that and
What
knows
about
how
if
to
if
get
it's
through it. You know.
yeah, what if it's a typical human being who's just in a rush and flashing you, and does it
Yeah,
give way?
so that's another question is, will you get people killing people by faking things on the road where the hoping to catch a self-driving vehicle?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, there'll be attacks that can be done on these things that you can't anticipate, because you can anticipate they're going to happen, but you can't anticipate exactly what they're going to succeed in doing, because they would have to test their attack on a real vehicle to see whether or not it would work. But it's just simply having a blinking light. So the vehicle is trained exactly the way you train these things. They're just trained with a massive amount of experience.
but yeah, the thing is, it's trained to do the right thing always, and humans
Yeah.
don't think that way.
Yeah, so it's trained to be very consistent. It is, because it's a machine, it's very
Yeah,
consistent. It doesn't have emotions. It doesn't get angry at people. It just doesn't. And so it stays calm the whole time. It's crazy.
amazing.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Juror 6.
Hi, Juror 6 is me. Yeah, I think this is an interesting question. I guess if the owner of the car is going to be legally responsible for any problems that the car causes, then obviously it's only fair that owner should also have the ability to cut in and intervene and take over, right? How can you be responsible but powerless? That isn't fair.
Yeah.
And so in that, they would have to have a driver's license in order to do that correctly. And then I think it is good to take some special exam to, as you say, like top it up, just like motorcycle license isn't the same as car, self-driving car, some other license. Now, whether or not, I think the danger of having the actual car, self-driving car manufacturers be the ones to design and to issue the license is dangerous, because I think they might make it overly easy. Also, if we are the responsible ones, is that not giving a get out of jail free card to the manufacturer? Should they not have any responsibility?
Oh, no,
for the
I think
invention?
we use the usual rules, which is the manufacturer is also responsible. If the manufacturer was negligent in some sense, they're responsible as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'd
I
like
think the situation that was mentioned earlier, where somebody did a cyber attack on your car,
Yeah, I think
I
Brian.
think that's getting to where the manufacturer is responsible, because we know how to protect really well against cyber attacks if we desire to do it. But it usually costs you in processors and stuff to be able to
You're
do that.
saying saying a cyber attack would be the fault of the manufacturer of the car?
I think there'll be some reason to believe, because we know, as a security guy, we know how to build these machines so that they're very resistant against cyber attacks. It's not always perfect. There'll be a lot of systems that were just not designed against the cyber attacks, but these self-driving systems have to be designed against cyber attacks. They have to be. Yeah.
And just to be clear, so everyone who has a self-driving car also needs to have a regular driver's license, right?
I don't think so necessarily. I think that it depends on the car and what they're doing in it.
Even if they're going to be responsible?
Even if they're going to, so if they're not, so that's a
See what I
question.
mean?
Yeah, so if you are using it as a taxi, so by the way, the Model Y that I have is the taxi, is the driverless taxi. It's the same software. It's running the same software, but it's not used as a taxi. So you can't talk to it as if it was a taxi, but it is the same software, which basically means that it could be used as a taxi if Tesla allowed it to be used as a taxi.
Well, I think
it is
it was
the
a good
same
point.
car.
Sorry. I think it was a good point too, what Andrew said about, in a way, maybe the good thing about a self-driving car, if it were good enough, would be that people who cannot normally drive would be able to get around. Children, dementia patients,
Yeah.
alcoholics.
Yeah.
On the other hand, in that case, who's responsible? I don't think Tesla wants to just pick up the responsibility for a bunch of alcoholics and dementia patients driving their cars.
I think there has to be some permissioning. This has to be figured out. You're exactly right. There's a lot of situations here that have to be figured out on how responsibility is assigned and so forth and so on. I totally agree with you. There's just a lot of situations here that are great.
It's an interesting question in that respect.
So I did find out that the SAE does have, it's called the Autonomous Vehicle Subcommittee of the SAE. That is an active committee. And so they are actively dealing with these problems. That's a thing to kind of monitor to see what they're doing. You can go online and see what that committee is. I haven't done it, but I know you'll be able to go online and see what that committee's published and so forth and so on. And it'll have to do with things like this. So 7.
Yes, that would be me. All right, I checked copy all the way down on your verdicts because I think the accusation is pretty straightforward. But I think outside of the specific topic today, I think there's going to be an arms race of terms of use policies and waivers and compliance issues, then negligent lawsuit minefields. I just have my doubts that it's going to do a good job of keeping up with the pace of advancement in AI. I still have this uneasiness about it all. And then I think this is all going to be very much US centric for a number of years.
I think because there's the nearest competitor to the Tesla is in China. The Chinese have something like 5 or 6 automotive manufacturers that are doing autonomous vehicles.
Yeah, so that was going to be my next point, is that if you look at Canada, for example, most US citizens don't realize that in Canada, if you have a car accident, the government pays for the vehicle damage of both sides. They don't even worry about wasting time concerning negligence. If there was gross negligence, it becomes a criminal issue. And then because they have socialized medicine, pervasive socialized medicine, then the government is covering medical costs on both sides as well. With a structure like that, you'd have a much different approach. You might even find that certain countries that have a modern infrastructure that AI can see and read, such as China, Canada, parts of Europe, might actually become forceful in requiring more autonomous driving as part of their system.
Well, that is, in fact, what's happening in China. So what you just described is happening in China. It's also happening in parts of Europe. So there are parts of Europe, and the Netherlands to lead on this, but there are parts of Europe where there's active governmental promotion of this kind of stuff because they can see where it's headed.
Yeah.
I would watch the Chinese, not because they're bad, but I'd watch them to see what they're doing because they are much more attuned to the fact this future is self-driving vehicles, and they want to get people safe as fast as possible. Of course, there are dictatorships, but they don't have a crazy dictator.
And I could, the 500,000 population city in Colombia that I live in, I could see a certain core segment of that city being infested with Waymos, and then everything outside of it will continue like it is today for decades.
Forever.
Because, but for two things. One is preserving employment for regular taxi drivers, and another is just the complexity of the environment beyond that core. It's just too much.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, thanks for the case. Enjoyed it.
Oh, George, you're right.
Hey everyone, on my side, I just want to understand that
That says, do you aware that there is a button in the taxi that can cause you to stop the taxi whenever you want? Okay. And they have to say yes, because that's the way these taxis work. There's a button that the passenger can hit that can cause the taxi to stop. And you can get some help. But you're right. If you're just a rider and you're in a completely automated vehicle, then that is a different thing. I think there'll always be some control that's needed by a human. So we'll see y'all next Thursday.
Okay.
Bye,
Okay.
y'all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
bye.